Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Lee Mabry with Activate Chicago Parents. We organized this event as a fact check on our possible next mayor. So we hope to learn more about what Paul Vallas has done in the other states that he's worked in. And we thank you all for joining us. Now, Rosemary, will you please give information about translation?
Yes, thank you, Lee. Para escuchar en español desde Zoom, desea escuchar en español usando una computadora, por favor, dé clic al globo en la parte de inferior abajo de su pantalla en su computadora. Y escoja Spanish desde su teléfono, iPad, tableta, excepto Chromebook. Toque la pantalla de su teléfono. Presione los 3 puntos encima de la palabra more o más en la parte derecha e inferior abajo de su pantalla. 3. Escoja interpretación o interpretation. 4. Escoja Spanish o español. 5. En la parte de arriba de la derecha de su teléfono, escoja done o finalizar.
And now, Bryn O'Brien to go through some information about the forum.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you, Rosemary. My name is Dr. Bryn O'Brien, and I'm also with Activate Chicago Parents. We appreciate you joining us today. We wanted to thank the organizations that are involved in today's forum. So Activate Chicago Parents, we are here in Chicago and we support public education. We support our public school teachers. And we really wanted to get some more information about what Paul Vallas has been doing on his attacks on public education. So we're also joined by members of the Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools, from the Erase the Board Coalition from New Orleans. And also thank you to Journey for Justice Alliance for helping bring everyone together today. To set the context, we provide a brief summary of Paul Vallas's work history as it relates to education. And he started as the CEO of Chicago Public Schools here in 1995 before moving to the school district of Philadelphia. Then after Hurricane Katrina, he became the superintendent of the Recovery School District of Louisiana. And because he became a disaster capitalist expert, he then went to Haiti and to Chile after earthquakes there to oversee recovery school districts being rebuilt in those countries. And once he came back, he was superintendent of Bridgeport Public Schools for just brief 2 years. And we just wanted to lay this out so that we're going to go kind of chronologically, touching on each of these districts and hearing from parents, family members, educators, community activists who live in these communities and have had direct experience working under Paul Vallas. So thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to our moderator, Dr. Monique Rideau-Smith.
Hello, thank you so very much, Brenna and Lee. I'm just very excited to be here with you all tonight for this really important information. And, you know, the organizers of this event, when they first came to us about organizing this forum, Lee, I believe, really likened it to anyone who goes to apply for a new job, right? And, you know, a potential employer not only interviews the applicant, they also ask for references. And so they can talk to others and, you know, that the applicant has worked for in the past, because they want to understand those perspectives. And those perspectives are really important about, you know, establishing a pattern of behavior, which really can tell us a lot about the applicant's values, their beliefs, their assets, their weaknesses. And so if we really think about it, Chicago, you know, we are the employer. The mayor works and serves us, the people and the residents of Chicago. And so before we entrust them with our most cherished and valuable resource, our children, we're going to do some reference checking. And so we are so glad today that we have with us folks who have worked in spaces that Paul Vallas has worked. We know that he actually started, as Brenna talked about, right here in Chicago. So we have award-winning science high school teacher Nina Hike with us. We have parent organizer extraordinaire Rosemary Vega with us. We also have a teacher, a former teacher, and the founder of Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools, Lisa Haver. Also a former librarian in Philadelphia Public Schools, Deb Grill. We have from Erase the Board Coalition in New Orleans, Ashana Bigard and Armcheese Coward. And then we also have from New Orleans, a former art teacher who's now a trauma therapist, Dee Moore Broussard. And we do not have with us tonight Maria Pereira, who had a family emergency, but she would have been joining us from Bridgeport. So we're still going to give you a little information about what happened to their school district in Bridgeport, Connecticut. But we did want to just send our love and positive energy to Maria. And we also want to definitely make sure we shout out G2 Brown from the National the Journey for Justice Alliance, who really helped to bring all of us together from across the country to have this really important conversation. So thank you to all of our panelists who will be here. We are really excited and looking forward to having this conversation. And so we're going to jump right in because we want to spend most of our time actually having the conversation. So we're going to start right here. We're going to start right here in Chicago because we know that Paul Vallas kind of started his education work right here in Chicago. And before we start talking about to our panelists about Chicago, let's just give a little context regarding what was happening in Chicago at the time when Paul Vallas took over the Chicago Public Schools. So in 1995, in Chicago, there was a shift in how Chicago Public Schools was governed. And in a Republican drafted bill, in Springfield that passed, it created mayoral control of schools in Chicago. And so whereas previously the head of Chicago Public Schools was a superintendent with an education background, like in many districts, this move in 95 really moved Chicago towards a business model of education. And so instead of having a superintendent, someone who had an education background, someone who was an educator, what was put in place to lead or to head Chicago Public Schools was a chief executive officer or a CEO, right? Oftentimes with little, if any, education experience is what we have experienced here in Chicago with our CEOs. So in 1995, Paul Vallas was appointed by then Mayor Daley to run Chicago Public Schools as a CEO. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Nina Hike, who was a new teacher during that time, to really talk to us about that shift from going from having a head of Chicago Public Schools be an educator towards a more business model. So Nina, tell us in your experience, what was it like to live and work under that business model of education?
Hi, everyone. It was more like a kind of checklist environment. And since when I arrived that year in 96, the business model had already been in play. And so, we had already been labeled a failing school. So students and teachers were feeling the pressure of taking the tests and making and hoping that, students show growth and that we are able to not be reconstituted. And so the pressure was on. It was, just test prep heavy. And just feeling that pressure to can I get the students ready to take this test, and it was just a lot of, we just felt that pressure on us. And then we didn't have any resources, to support the whole student. So it was just more like, coming in and did you checklist your vocabulary words or whatever, test prep, did you do that? Did you do this? And so then the following school year, we got reconstituted and the entire school was fired, from the lunch lady to the janitor to the engineer. Everyone in the whole entire school was fired from the school and was told that we could reapply for our jobs. But it was just, just being labeled as a failing school. And it's just kind of left us kind of like with no hope. But again, we pressed on, but it was just really a turbulent time, a turbulent environment, a lot of pressure on students and teachers to get ready for this one-day test that'll determine your future, if the school is going to be open or not. So no regards for the community, parents, or anything like that. Just, this one-day test is determining your future to stay open. So it was a really horrible experience for me as a second-year teacher. Then I was also pregnant too, so and got fired. So it was really interesting dynamic to go through as just being a teacher, being excited about teaching, and then coming into this slap down, culture of, you better pass this test or your school is going to be closed. So.
Wow, that definitely sounds traumatic, especially as a new teacher, right? Can you tell us a little bit about where you were working, the students and the community that you were working with at that particular time, Sue?
So yes, I worked at Aura High School on the west side of Chicago. I would say the population of students were probably at least 90% Black students, and most of the teachers were Black too, that worked there. So it was, it was, the environment again was very hostile in terms of, testing and what you're doing with the test and things of that nature. So I think that, that in the community was, being disinvested in. So, a lot of things were closing, a lot of vacant lots, things of that nature in the community. So.
And what's interesting, I would love for you to talk about the fact that, you were considered one of those failing teachers, right? Because of the school not being able to, as a whole, reach a particular test score. But you were also an award-winning teacher, right? You were a science teacher that were doing amazing things in your classroom. So just talk to us about that, because that seems to be a contradiction there.
Oh, yeah. So currently I'm a finalist for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. I'm a 2021 finalist. And so, yes, we were definitely learning science in my classroom. I actually got visited for the Principal for a Day program that they were having, and my students got to present their research to Mayor Daley. So we were definitely learning science inside of the school for sure. But again, everything was based on the test and your test score. And that's what dictated the closure of the school.
Thank you. And I am going to put in a reminder, because I have to remind myself as well. We do have Spanish interpretation. So if we can just remember at times to slow down. I know we get into talking about what's really important to us. And so sometimes we can speak too fast, myself included. I'm very horrible with this, but I'm going to try to make sure to just keep reminding us to slow down, because we want to make sure that our Spanish folks are absolutely able to gather all this really important content. So thank you so much, Nina. And we're going to talk a second about using test scores and student performance on standardized tests to determine whether or not schools are successful or failing, right? Because some people may think like, this is not problematic. They might feel that it is important, that we ensure that students are learning. And so we're going to talk just briefly about why the use of standardized tests themselves is problematic. There are lots of reasons, but we're going to really just focus on the fact that you cannot create a bar or a measure of success for all students and say, okay, we are going to make sure, or all students have to reach this bar or measure of success. You can't do that, but then fail to provide all students with the same opportunities and resources in order to meet that bar, right? We know that students in under-resourced communities like where Nina was working, right? We know that they do not have and have not had access to the same educational experiences as those who live in well-resourced communities or that attend schools that are well-resourced. So you have to make access to resources and opportunities consistent across the board. because a system in which you standardize the output, but intentionally fail to standardize the input, that's not equity. That's a setup, right? Black children in Illinois are 4 times more likely to go to an under-resourced school than their white peers. For Latinx students, they're 3 times more likely. So it's not surprising that when Vallas instituted this system of so-called accountability, that the schools that were impacted the most were schools that were in communities that had the least access to resources, overwhelmingly Black and Latinx schools. And so when Vallas placed these schools, 100 of them, right, on academic probation, he laid the groundwork for further destabilizing these schools. And Rosemary Vega was a parent organizer and still is a parent organizer, but was a parent organizer at that time as well. And so Rosemary, if you could just talk to us about your experience of what happened after that groundwork had been laid, the impact of this probationary academic process, the way that it impacted Chicago schools.
Thank you, Dr. Monique. It was, if I can describe it, as a war on parents, a war on Black and Brown communities when it came down to education. It was something that was a business plan, like Nina said. This was from 2002. They started with 3 closing schools. And in 2003, they went to 6 schools. And in the year after that, they went right to 13 schools. And then in 2013, they had 200 and something schools on the list. And Chicago got up and fight, bringing it down to 50. And we still lost. 50 was a big loss. It was a huge loss in Chicago. It was a shock across our city. We lost thousands of Black and Brown children. We don't know where they went. Families as well, because when Ram got here, and they started saying, we're going to build the new Chicago, that's what they meant. They were finishing what Arnie Duncan had done. They were finishing what Paul Vallas came. Paul Vallas, when he says he didn't close the schools, he didn't. Paul Vallas came with a plan. Paul Vallas was that businessman. Do you hear what we're saying? The schools were into business style. They were like, we're going to close this and we're going to open that. They were telling us that our schools were failing and that there was no money, but they were also opening schools in the same sentence, in the same block. They were cutting us, but, healing other schools and just spending money everywhere. And Paul Vallas, the way he did New Orleans and we got to watch, is what he wants to come and do to Chicago. And we just can't allow that, because as a parent fighting against a monster felt lonely. It felt like I was being erased. And let's keep in mind that Paul Vallas wants to make sure that no history is taught in school, especially Black history. And we got to make sure that that doesn't happen. In Chicago, we need, solid. We need education. Our children need resources. We need equities in our schools. And we want to make sure that we don't go back to 2013, where we lost families, where we lost children, and where we lost school buildings.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to ask you and Nina as well, I know you both, one was working with students, right? Rosemary, I believe you also had children who were in the schools at that time. If you could just talk and speak to, the impact that these being labeled a failing school and then having schools close or be on academic probation and have the risk of being closed. How did that impact the young people in your lives?
I would say, I'm impacted too, because my grammar school was closed. So Laura Ward Elementary School was closed, and then they shifted to they closed Ryerson because I grew up over in the Orr community. I actually attended Orr for 2 years myself as a student, and so it impacted me because the school itself is a community hub for things to happen. And so it's, you know, I can't, like, I look at I ride past my old grammar school every day to go to Westinghouse High School to teach, and I see that it's closed and they moved it to a whole nother building and closed another school. And just that devastation in that community where, you know, you could go to those schools and you can, you know, meet up with your friends and things of that nature. But now the school has changed to, you know, I think they've redid or like 4 more times, you know. And so I just think that it's just a more destabilization of the community. That's what's happening. So.
I would say it was a big impact, especially for my kids. They said that our schools were failing, but they were actually failing the standardized point they wanted to create. Because in Lafayette, we just had students, all different kinds of, like Dr. Monique said, every child has their needs, speeds, and challenges. And that was what Lafayette offered. And that's what they took. My children had an orchestra there that gave them a passport to be able to go to good high schools, because we don't have good neighborhood schools. So we have to make sure that we make it into good neighborhood schools. So my children made it to these good schools through that program. Unfortunately, for my 2 smaller children, they didn't get so lucky. They haven't been able to touch a violin. They haven't been able to play orchestra because they took that from them. They took them from their neighborhood school. And it's about to be 10 years anniversary of 50 school closings in Chicago. And my kids, my 2 younger kids, have not been able to enjoy music or arts in their new school. And that's just what my children have seen. Chicago had an impact everywhere.
Thank you so much for that. That really does help us to see just the impact, the psychic impact that these kinds of punitive measures have. And Vallas resigned from Chicago in 2001 as the CEO of Chicago Public Schools. And he resigned because the research showed that the policies, this academic probation and reconstituting schools and firing everyone and having educators reapply for their jobs, that it didn't work, that it absolutely did not work, that there was not an improvement in student performance, right? And now we have over a decade of research that shows that these punitive measures do not work, right? But ironically, Vallas, who was the one who advocated for and helped institutionalize this punitive system of so-called accountability, wasn't held accountable for the failure, right? Instead, he resigned and took his same failed ideas and the same failed rhetoric and policies to another part of the country, right? To another school district that was serving Black and brown children. And so we're going to shift and talk about that now. We're going to go to Philadelphia. Turning to Philadelphia, you know, there's been a lot of attention lately on Philadelphia public schools because of the award-winning show Abbott Elementary, right, which is based on the experience of Philadelphia public schools. And so our Philadelphia guests, can you all talk about your experiences in the school district when Paul Vallas took over in 2002? And did you see any similarities to the same kinds of things that Nina and Rosemary just talked about?
Yes, thank you so much, Monique, and thank you to Chicago Parents for having me and the other members of APS here. Yeah, I was just putting in my notes, it seems like everybody's accountable except for Vallas. So I want to thank you for inviting me and the members of APS. We are a grassroots organization. We've been around for 11 years now. We're really still trying to protect public schools from the devastation first begun by Vallas here in Philly. I cannot say strongly enough, it would be a tragedy for Vallas to become Chicago mayor. I really shudder to think of the amount of damage he could cause, not just to the public schools, but to all public assets. The thing to remember about Vallas is that his record is one of service to the rich and powerful. He is a con man, and he leaves destruction in his wake. Vallas was brought into Philadelphia in 2002 after the state took control over the district. The local Board of Ed was disbanded and replaced by the state-controlled School Reform Commission. The same state that underfunded schools for decades was, of course, I know everybody here has lived this, now using that as a justification to take them over. And Vallas was brought in by the SRC, the School Reform Commission, as the money guy, the business guy, not the education guy, obviously, because he doesn't know anything about education, still does not. He was our first and last administrator identified as a CEO. He came in, he was sold to us. He was the guy who was going to balance the books once and for all, but it became apparent that he was brought in as the agent of privatization, taking control of public assets and giving them to private interests. The children, I say were an afterthought. I don't even know if I could say they were an afterthought. But it wasn't just the schools themselves. There are a couple things that Deb and I wanted to mention. Vallas had other ways of delivering to the private sector. He sold off school district headquarters, which if you know Philadelphia at all, was at 21st Street and the Parkway, which is a beautiful, center of arts. And this building was a beautiful, beautiful Art Deco building that sometimes kids would actually take field trips to see that building. It was such a beautiful building. Vallas was here, I think 2 or 3 years, decided to sell off school district headquarters, a beautiful Art Deco building. And of course it was made into condos. At the same time, and he sold off other district properties. This is, Mr. Financial Genius, one that the district ended up paying rent on to put a new school into that exact property. But the other, and I think the most egregious looting was of the artwork in the public schools, in school classrooms, hallways, and offices. Wilson Middle School up in the northeast part of the city was really virtually an art museum, as well as a school, because they had a principal a long time ago who collected artwork. And he very clearly brought that artwork in for the students. It belonged to the district, which means it belonged to the people, and it belonged to the children. I'm not kidding you. We came back into school Monday morning after Christmas break with these stories of principals coming into their schools and thinking they had been robbed. He didn't tell anybody. This did not come up at a public meeting. He didn't even tell his own people. He just sent these guys out to loot the buildings. And it was, like the Who's in Whoville, coming down and seeing all these empty spaces where their artwork was. And it was really just horrible. That artwork belongs to the public, but this is what Vallas is about. Now, a few years ago, we came very close to losing all of it. It was just stuck in storage, like at the end of Indiana Jones, stuck in a box and stuck in a room. We came close to losing all that artwork, but we did have a few people from Wilson Middle School who stopped that, but it hasn't been restored. It's still in storage. I think Deb wants to say a little bit more about that. Unmute yourself, Deb.
It's in an undisclosed location. No one knows where it is. Several of the pieces are missing. They're unaccounted for. They did an audit in 2009, and several of the pieces, more than several of the pieces, have disappeared. The SRC thought that they could sell it when Vallas thought that he could sell it. And then when they found out they wouldn't get as much money for it as they thought they would, they never put them back in the schools. They claim that the schools do not have the security that's needed for that. So it's still sitting in storage. And I don't know that it will ever come back to the schools. And it was in more than one school. It was in many different schools.
Yeah.
I mean, there were Philadelphia artists that donated their artwork to the schools. And now it's sitting in storage. Or in someone's living room, someone who used to work for Vallas, we don't know.
Wow. I'm so glad you all have brought this up, because here in Chicago, Vallas has been kind of cast as this financial expert or a financial fixer. And so I'd love for you to, again, just talk about that and talk about, how did he leave the Philadelphia school system when it comes to the budget and comes to the, the finances of the Philadelphia school district?
Yeah. One reason I think that Vallas is still out there as a legitimate person and is able to continue to run for office, even after such a record of devastation, is the media could never admit they had been conned by Vallas. They would never admit it. Brought in as, the big financial guy, and like education was an afterthought. This was all about balancing the books, and that's why we had to have a state takeover. And it's like the Chicago people said. It was all just like moving pieces around, blaming teachers, union busting. The whole budget genius thing was ridiculous. When he left here, he had a 5-year contract, but he didn't even make it to the end of the contract. Things were so bad. And the guy who was supposed to balance our books and make everything wonderful, when he left, we had a this is 20 years ago, $73 million deficit. And when he left, he collected his performance bonus, even though he did the opposite of what he was supposed to do, and his retention bonus. And I remember saying to somebody, the district, how to get a retention bonus if he left early. It was like, well, he cashed in all his vacation days, or they just gave it to him. So, when I heard the Chicago people talk about, accountability, this guy is never held accountable. And the media enables him because they won't come out and say, we were conned. He came in, he had no idea what he was doing in terms of education. He sold off the school district building, stuck all this artwork, took it away from the children. They just really, I really think I can't talk about the media in other places, but that is absolutely a fact in Philadelphia. And we've never really recovered from Vallas. When you think about how things could have been, we could have been fighting for more funding, but they were coming up with these privatization schemes that were expanded under the next two superintendents. That is one reason why we lost over 25 neighborhood schools. While charters were expanding, we're losing our neighborhood schools. So I think of it as poisoning the well. I don't know if we'll ever recover from what Vallas started in this city. And Deb, maybe you want to,
Well, he increased the charter schools. We went from 4 charter schools to 45 charter schools, and he outsourced several school buildings. I mean, contracts to 7 different organizations, 3 for profit, 2 nonprofits, 2 universities, and he gave the lowest performing schools for them to run. 80 elementary and middle schools were involved in that. He also started outsourcing discipline. He outsourced discipline schools. We had 2 or 3 discipline schools in Philadelphia. He outsourced them to private companies.
Right.
Yeah, and he developed this 0 tolerance discipline policy that was just, instead of getting counselors in the buildings and instead of getting social workers in the buildings, he would just ship the kids out to these places that were like prisons. I remember when I was teaching at Germantown and they were sending kids to those schools, and it was like you couldn't carry a pencil, you had to stand in line, you weren't allowed to talk when you went from one room to the other. It was horrible. And as far as the testing, that was, you've talked about the testing, but I remember moderating those tests, and it was, the kids just felt like failures. It was like telling them they were failures. I felt so bad for them because the school district had not, while he was there, had not given the teachers the resources they need and the kids the help they need to succeed. So they were failing the kids. The district was failing the kids, and instead they were labeling the kids and the teachers and the schools failing.
Yeah, and here we are, 20 something years later, and because he is not held accountable, because he just keeps recycling this from place to place. You know, I told my sister where I was going today, and she said, I cannot believe she's not a teacher. She wasn't involved in any of this, but she said, I can't believe that it's the same Paul Vallas still out there doing the same thing. Yeah.
And so if we talk about, if we're seeing a pattern, right? We see a pattern of the loss of neighborhood schools, right? The expansion of charter schools, which funnel funds away from
Right.
already under-resourced neighborhood schools. We're also seeing financial devastation, right? Because in Chicago, the same thing, like because he decided, hey, we won't keep contributing to the teachers' pension fund, the pension that they've worked for, we'll kick that down the road. And so now it has just exponentially increased. And so has caused all kinds of financial issues and burdens. And so again, we're seeing the same kind of replicated failed policies in each place. So let's go to our next place in the country, to New Orleans. And, you know, after surviving one of the most devastating natural disasters in U.S. history, Hurricane Katrina, unfortunately, you all then had to deal with another storm, right? And the storm of Vallas then coming in to carry out what essentially became a charter takeover, right? And so for our New Orleans representatives, in a recent debate here, a mayoral debate, Vallas said that New Orleans schools are still public schools run by nonprofits. He didn't call them charters. So just tell us a little bit about the state of the New Orleans public school system, and just give us some accurate information regarding, you know, charter schools or public schools. Just fill us in, give us some clarification.
So, hi, I guess I'll start because I've heard so many things that I'm not gonna lie, I was triggered. When she was describing the discipline schools, he came down here. You know, imagine our children have been super traumatized by the storm, lost relatives, neighbors, whole neighborhoods wiped out. And the discipline schools she described, those were the schools that when he started running Recovery School District, and Artrice will probably tell you, but right before the storm, like right after the storm, Artrice, you go ahead because you handled this part really well, talking about how they dropped the scores.
Okay. In New Orleans, we have absolutely mute yourself, Shana. In New Orleans, we have absolutely no district schools. We have no traditional public schools at all. We have no neighborhood schools at all, not a single one. Our local elected school district does not run a single school, not one single school at all. All of our local elected officials do is basically the only reason they exist is to authorize a charter or to close a charter. That is the only power they have. That is the only thing they're willing to do. Although they still have the power to run direct schools, they refuse to do it at all. Now, when we talk about accountability, when you guys were saying he's never held accountable, and you're right, everybody else is held accountable. A lot of people thought New Orleans, go with the flow of what they said, that all of New Orleans schools were failing schools. Now, let me tell you this. When they came in, when Paul Vallas and the charter people came in directly after Katrina, while there still was water in the city, literally, they still had water in people's homes in the city. They fired every last teacher, every last custodian, every last anything that had anything to do with the school board. They completely fired all of them while there was still water in their homes. Also, while there was still water in their homes, they decided this is our chance to take all of the schools because they're failing. We already had on the books of law saying that if schools were failing, that you could do a state takeover. When they tried to do the state takeover, they thought, because they just believed it, because people were saying it, that all of New Orleans schools were failing schools. But when they tried to take the schools out of 160 something schools, that's how many we had, they were only able to take 12, because that is all that was failing schools, was about 12 schools. So what they did, again, while we had water in our homes, they enacted an emergency legislation where they did something called Act 35. Well, what they did is they took the SBA score and said, which was the average score was 87, which is was a B. they turned that threshold 87 and say failing school. So while water was still in our homes, we weren't in our city, we were struggling to try and get back home. They fired everybody and created an emergency legislation act 35 and raised the failing bar to 87. And that was the way they were able to take all of our schools. Once they took all of our schools, which they still weren't able to take all of them, they still had 13 that they weren't able to take, but they were able to take most of them when they raised the bar to 87, which was actually a B. But they say that any school that was an 87 or below was a failing school. That is the Act 35 law that they created while we were still out of our city with water in our homes. Once they did that, they came in, they started the charter system. Recovery School District. He came in and he started handing out charters like Oprah Winfrey. Everybody got a charter that wasn't from New Orleans. If you came in and you had a degree in lingerie, but you said you had an idea for children in New Orleans, they were handing them out to everybody that come except for local New Orleans educators, because they fired all of them, broke up the union. There is currently in New Orleans, we do not have a functioning union. A pension, there's none of the schools put money into a pension for teachers. There's none of that. All of our teachers are at will contract employees from year to year. That is what we have. And so once they realized that the charter schools couldn't uphold the threshold that they created, this 87 or higher, then they lowered the score back down for a failing school to where now currently you can have a score of a 43 and you still would have a C. That is what they did here to our schools, to us, to our babies. And now you literally can have children that live in the same home that do not attend the same school, because what we have now is a one app. It's called the one application for people who don't know what that means. And what that means is now they say we have choice. We have no choice. But they're calling it the best choice because you have to fill out the application. You have to put down about 13 schools. You don't know what school that they're going to place your child in. And you have to wait months to find out which school they place your child in. And you can get back a placement that say they didn't place your child at all. So now you have to do a second and do a list and just hope that your child gets into a school that they're placing your child into. And once that happens, your child will have to get on the bus and can pass up 8 different schools to get to a school across the river, which is about 10 miles away, which is a failing school. Like they'll bus your child past schools that are better schools and put them to a failing school across the river. Now they're on the bus for waking up 5 o'clock in the morning on the bus, going to a failing school across the river, passing up 8 schools. And the children from across the river are getting on the bus at 5 o'clock, coming to a school near your home. So you literally don't have a community. The kids that live around each other in the neighborhood don't know each other because they're not in school with each other. And the only recourse they have to do anything when the schools are when parents have issues, you can't go to your elected officials and ask them to do anything for you, because they'll tell you they don't have control over the schools. So they want to tell you that our school board have back control of the schools. They do not, because if I was to call my school board elected official right now and say I'm having a problem with my child's school, he's going to redirect me to the charter's private board. And the way they treat you is like, if you don't like my school, take them out. That's their mentality.
And D, I see you with your hand raised. Definitely want to get into this conversation. Please, by all means, go ahead.
Yeah, because I started working, I was hired in 1994. I wasn't a regular art teacher. I was a teaching artist and I worked at central office. So by 98, 99, we started to have like this, every 2 years, a new superintendent. Something weird was going on. They were constantly threatening our program, which was Arts Connection. I taught at 47 of the 122 public schools up until Katrina. And by 2000, they started to take over our schools. Alvarez and Marcel were lawyers that came in and they took over basically the school board. So we started to sound the alarm to regular educators, and I started making contacts with New York public schools. I contacted Chicago and Philadelphia because there was no social media at the time, and I knew something was going on because we were very much aware that they were trying to privatize public education throughout communities everywhere. So we were hearing about it, LA, Chicago, Philadelphia. So we were just scraping to keep our job at that point because our program was strictly like grant run. And so right before the storm, I decided to go to special education, TAV, to hold on to some sort of like retirement money. And I just knew that Friday we left, I knew we weren't coming back. I knew it. I could just feel it before we even left that was the weekend of Katrina. So when, after the storm, 2 weeks after the storm, we all got notified. 2 weeks after the storm, we got notified that we were fired, and I'm one of the 7,000, and that we could go pick up our check at the Western Union, and it was for $2,000. Now, mind you, we were collecting all of our sick days and stuff. We were about to do these. Anyway, it's a long story, but all that money went away. They weren't even letting us know where our retirement money. I lost 8 years of retirement money. And I wasn't the only one. There were several educators, and especially teaching artists, because we weren't as protected as others. So they started to take over our board a couple of years before the storm. So that made it such a ripe environment for them to come in. So we had wiggle room from 2005 to 2007. We were hearing, I'm going to name schools. We were hearing Lusher was going to charter, and they were starting to charter before Katrina, by the way. Ben Franklin High School, and everybody was we were like, what is our thing? And then we heard about Recovery School District. It was right before Vallas was coming in. And they told us that we would have to take an exam, and then we would have an interview, and then they would think about hiring us back. And I was just floored at that time. And then I started getting phone calls from all these veteran educators. They were opening Algiers charter schools. So I went to that route. And these are all veteran educators. We were all feeling like we had we were protecting ourselves, but I kept warning them. And warning them. I said, I'm not feeling good about this. We have no protection. We have no union. And then lo and behold, Paul Vallas shows up. He's a con artist. I'm telling you, that community, I was at O'Perry Walker, and LP Landry was trying to open up, and he walked into that community, and people don't understand. Well, public school communities understand, but each of our school was a community school, and there was like pride. Like my mom went to Forche. You know what I'm saying? Everybody had where your mom, where your parents, where your cousins, we still say that. Like I had cousins that went to McMain, and stuff like that. And I mean, all that's gone. We don't even have that. So when he was promising, LB Landry community was named after an African American doctor, very rich culture. He was telling them that this school was for them. And then I found out through the grapevine that he was lying to all of us, and they were going to name it Algiers Unified High. And it was just, I can't even tell you the level of trauma. And during this time, that's when I went back to finish my graduate degree in art therapy. And I kept telling the principal at the time at O'Perry Walker, the level of trauma that we're experiencing and re-experiencing right now is monumental. And trauma changes the brain, and it's physiological. And people started getting sick. I lost so many of my colleagues, y'all don't even know, to so many different illnesses. And it's just, when I was hearing Rosemary talk, it was hard for me not to cry. And I'll have to tell you, before, when y'all invited me to this, I've had nightmares. Luckily I do know the trauma tools to use, but we really have to come together.
We really need to have more of these conversations because we have to push back because they target communities of color. They tried to target some areas after Ida, where it's the Pointe-au-Chien. There's the native tribe south of New Orleans. They tried to target them, and luckily they got their school back, but mainly because I believe because they're state recognized and they're protected. But nobody protected us, and now it is even far worse. 15 years, I lost track of time. Our community is definitely scarred from it. And it has not only affected all of our public school children. There's no public schools. This is privatized. They get to take public money and they do whatever they want. And I've witnessed it at every charter. And I wish I could name them all, but I can't because I don't want to get in trouble. But I witnessed it. They inflate the minutes on the IEPs, or they say they're getting services on the IEPs, and these children aren't getting any of the services. The amount of money that they're making off the backs of children is disgusting. And I'm trying not to be too, what else?
If you go to Erase the Board, we have a pinned post that shows you the amount of money that the CEOs are paying themselves to run failing schools. And that's why I say when they close the schools, all of those people get to leave with every dollar they made. And you have kids that have been in a building since kindergarten, and it's their 6th or 7th, 8th, or 8th grade year, and that's being told that they are failures. And because they are failures, their school has to close. And the CEO has made every year $200,000 to run that school into the ground. And then they leave and they go and create another career for themselves. And we are left here with higher juvenile crime. Our children are falling out of school earlier and earlier because of that discipline model that the young lady was saying. That's their discipline school. That is our schools. Our schools are zero tolerance. Most of our children are touching the police officers by the time they're in the 5th grade at these schools because they don't even understand the laws about special education or behavior. So they're calling the cops on them for simple things. And this is something that Ashana can hit on better than I ever can. Ashana?
Wrong question. I think we have make the assumption that we can appeal to people's moral base and the goal was actually to educate our kids. When people say it wasn't successful, I always say, no. If you understand what the real goal was. So Paul Vallas had already caused havoc in Chicago. The goal was to disperse communities, to decimate the middle class, to decimate unions. They already knew our children were traumatized pre-Katrina. Post-Katrina, there was like some data came out from the Department of Health saying that they knew that 2/3 of our population would have PTSD, the most extreme form of trauma. And so to meet these same children with zero tolerance policies, telling them that they couldn't have talk during lunch, they had no recess, they had no music, they had no arts, the programs that actually help with trauma, to spend when we first got back, they spent $22 million on security for 20 schools instead of counselors and therapists. It's like, no, they're not that ignorant. They're not that ignorant. So Vallas is a tool, and the discipline schools, the reason they look different, I believe, in ours is that all of our schools, because they looked at our schools were 86% African-American, 84% free and reduced lunch. So definitely it was the poor Black people are criminals, so that's what we're going to treat them like. We're not going to treat them with compassion, kindness, or even just the bare minimum law abiding. Like Trees talked about, like the majority of our schools still do not function, are not law abiding. Federal and state law, especially when it comes to children with disabilities. Our school system was sued twice and is right now under federal consent decree for discriminating against children with special needs. Like, that's what I mean. Literally, they had this parent named Sue who tried to bring her son Clark, who's on the autism spectrum. 24 schools told her that they wouldn't even enroll him. And then they said, well, that's why we're creating the One App, right? We're creating the One App. The One App is blind. Well, our One App is not blind. Our One App is racist and classist. Because 75% of our white children go to the same 5 schools. more than 75% of our upper middle class children go to the same 5 schools as the white children. So unless that algorithm is extremely racist and classist, it doesn't make sense. And people say, well, the young white parents will opt out of the one app, the ones with money, and they'll put their children in private school. Yes, the ones with money. But if the one app is blind to race and blind to income, what about the poor white children? Why don't they wind up in the zero tolerance policy schools with no music and no art? And and let's not forget, our veteran teachers right now in New Orleans, most of them are former TFA, okay? Because they also hit us with the Teach for America teachers. And let me tell you something, I still do not like Teach for America as a program, but I understand it would have been a great teaching assistant program. Why wasn't it a teaching assistant program? Well, it wasn't because the idea is not actually to educate poor Black and brown children. The idea, you don't want someone in that school building that understands adolescent development, that understands early childhood development, that understands what children's actual needs are and how to meet those needs. Because then you're talking about an educated population that has critical thinking skills, that can fight for unions, that can fight for land, that can fight for things. We don't want that. Because you couldn't have wanted that and created on every level. Every level. We're gonna starve the schools of books. We're gonna starve them of professional teachers with criteria. We're not gonna give them healthy lunches. We're gonna cut out PE. We're gonna cut out recess. We're gonna give them silent lunches. We're gonna make them walk on lines. You can't do that systematically, whereas so many schools doing it by accident. You might accidentally even create 5 terrible schools, but you don't accidentally create 80 terrible schools. That is not an accident. That's purpose. And so I think that we spend a lot of time assuming that Paul Vallas and his cronies were making a mistake. I think it's very much on purpose, but the problem becomes, why don't our business community, our politicians and nonprofits understand that if you decimate our poor population, if you make it so that they don't have access to resources, don't have access to programs, don't have access to things that give them hope and joy, then it makes the quality of the whole city worse. You don't have to have a child in this school. Your child has to walk the streets and go to the grocery store with my child. And if my child is hungry, they're going to hold your child up. Do you like having to pay extra taxes for extra security? Do you like having to be locked into your neighborhood? No? Well, then this is what you need to care about. Because we had a lot of people that went along with Paul Vallas and his cronies. There were a lot of enablers because it wasn't their children and it wasn't their community. Not understanding, no, this is our city. This is our community. They are our children. Paul Vallas is a liar, but people know he's a liar. We didn't know he was a liar at first, but thank you to Jatu and Journey for Justice, because they called us and it was like, look, he's a liar. He means y'all no good. But he said in the faces of our parents and students and told them over and over again all the wonderful things he was going to give them. I have video of it. Him at Rethink, promising them he was going to put in these great lunches and these bathrooms and all these things that, of course, never came to be. Because what he has a record of and what he does well is lying. He's also very charismatic. And I don't understand. Well, we don't understand. You thought that he was going to lie to the folks in Chicago, lie to the folks in New Orleans, lie to the folks in Philly, but then come back and tell the truth to you? I mean, people do grow and change. But yeah, if you are known for lying and cheating and creating harmful conditions for the least of us, for small children, then that's probably who you are. I mean, but you know.
Because it's Sunday, I'm gonna preach the word a little bit. It said that, you know, a tree will be known by its works. And so this is, again, the reason for this forum. It's the reason for this panel is that we need to do a reference check before Paul Vallas thinks he's going to get back here and be able and entrusted with our children. We need to check references, because your pattern of behavior tells who you are. It tells what you value. And so thank you so much to our New Orleans folks. That was, I couldn't almost take all of that. because again, this is triggering, it's re-traumatizing to just see how this trauma has been perpetuated just across the country. And so Paul Vallas then left and said, I'm going to take this global, right? So he went into Haiti with these same failed policies, went into Chile with these same failed policies, and then came back into the States. And while we unfortunately don't have our representative from Bridgeport, Connecticut, we know that some of the same things were then posited in this particular community. The over-testing, the testing of students every 6 weeks, right? But Bridgeport didn't keep him around for too long. He only managed to be there for 2 years. And that was because he didn't even have the qualifications necessary to be superintendent in that space. He could have gotten a waiver so that he could have stayed, but he didn't even do the work to do that. And so he essentially was kicked out of Bridgeport, Connecticut after 2 years for not meeting the qualifications. So I just want to go around again with our panel. And if you could just speak to the voters of Chicago. I think you all have already told us your stories and your experiences. But if in a few brief words, if you could just tell the voters of Chicago in your own words, what we need to know as we get to the polls, what would be your words to the voters of Chicago? And how about maybe we just can put hands up and I can call on you and then you can come off mute. But I just like all of those who have been a part of our panel tonight to speak directly to those who will be listening into Chicago voters who have this choice between Brandon Johnson and Paul Vallas. Okay, Rosemary, I see you with your hand up, so let's get it.
Thank you, Dr. Monique. I would say to the voters of Chicago, this is simple for us. This is a fight for our children. So we get up, we go to the polls, and we vote what's right for our children. We make sure that we teach Paul Vallas a lesson. Hands off our city, hands off our children, hands off our schools. And we don't want to relive what we've been living. Well, we just heard the teachers, no union busting, no cops in our schools. We need resources, and we need Chicago to get up and vote for Brandon Johnson, who is our better choice, who is the love and healing that our schools need and our children deserve. Please go vote.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, I will just say again, it would be a tragedy for, not just Chicago, I think, but really for everybody in all of these places that have experienced the dishonesty and the devastation of Paul Vallas. I just, I would almost feel the same way I did in November of 2016. It would be the beginning of a very, very bad time for the city. And when you validate somebody like Vallas, it doesn't stay where he is. So I thank the people in Chicago, and I hope that we've done something that will stop Vallas from being your mayor.
Thank you, Armtrees.
I just want to say to the voters of Chicago that I know it's easy to fall for the tough on crime rhetoric type of thing, especially when you got a lot going on in your city. But even down here, we have to look around and see the things that's going on as a cry for help. And it's a calling on us as a community to finally stand up against those things that we know do not work for us, even though we have to go through the trauma of the violence, and we need to find a way to better cease it and use the right things that we know work and stop keep recycling people and things that are creating further harm to us. Like, vote for a long-term plan, not a short one.
Thank you so much. Any of our other panelists, what advice would you like to give to Chicago voters? Dee?
Remember, public education is a cornerstone of democracy. This privatization model is not about being democratic. It is a prison to pipeline school system, period. I've witnessed it. We've all witnessed it in New Orleans. And now we have a mental health crisis in New Orleans. They are kicking children out of some of the charter schools and telling parents they're not allowed to come back in until they get a mental health evaluation from Children's Hospital. And there's a 6 to 9 month wait to get that done. There's so much more that Chicago needs to know, but I don't have time to let you know, but public school is democracy.
Thank you so much. Nina?
I would say to the voters of Chicago that the students and schools, we're not test scores, we're real people. And we live in the communities and we have to fight for our communities. And I'm banking on Brandon Johnson to invest in the people of Chicago. And I'm willing to, work towards that. And I hope that you will too.
Thank you so much. Deb?
Oh, okay, here I am. He's basically a scam artist, and that's what I want to say to the voters in Chicago. I mean, he's destroyed how many school systems? And listening to the two panelists from New Orleans was just heartbreaking. I feel like I want to cry. It's been so bad. And how can you let someone who cares so little about the people of the city and the children in the city, how can you elect them to be mayor for your city? Don't do it.
Thank you. Ashana, you want to take us out?
We have to ask more than our children to be accountable, because we're quick to say, well, we need to discipline the kids. They need to be accountable. Well, this man has destroyed whole systems and cities. We want to send a message to our children that there is accountability, that accountability doesn't end because you're rich and powerful. In fact, those are the people who need to be more accountable. We want to send a message to our children about justice. I don't care how charismatic he is. And then even his stance on crime, more police respond to crime. They don't prevent crime. Crime prevention is education, quality education, great jobs, great housing policies. So if he's promising you more police, he's promising you more crime so that they can come respond to it. His record is he doesn't care about children. He doesn't care about people. Remember what people say about good people. Good people do nothing. When good people do nothing, that is the real evil. Holds Paul Vallas accountable for what he's done. Believe him at his word of not keeping his word, and show our children that real justice and real accountability is possible. Don't vote for him.
Oh, I just want to thank you all. Thank our panelists so much. Can we give some applause? Can we give some thank yous, some hugs and kisses? Anything we can. We are so grateful for you and for you telling your story. In many ways, reliving your trauma, right? Out of love for your city, out of love for our city, and for a love for people, a love for children. And I hope that what they have shared here really does stick with folks, and that we think about it and that it influences us as we go and make this really important decision as to who we are going to entrust with our children. Before I turn it back over to our organizers, I really just want to lift up some things that have been said here because they are just so vitally important. It is not a coincidence that Paul Vallas has held continued positions of power and leadership in school districts that serve predominantly Black, poor children. That is not a coincidence. Make no mistake, Paul Vallas would not be able to have a consistent pattern of failure and be allowed to work in middle and upper income white school districts. He would not. But because his failed experiments have caused harm and trauma, mostly on Black children and communities, he's been allowed not just to continue his reign of terror, but to write it on a resume and project it as an accomplishment. This is cruel, it's anti-Black, and it is evil. And if you are a parent or you are entrusted with young people, if you're thinking that, hey, my student does well on standardized tests, they attend a good school, so Vallas might be okay for me and my family. I ask that you think deeply about what you believe your children deserve, because all children deserve that. And until Black children and children of color are valued and affirmed and treated like they matter as much as white children, we will never attain all the things that we all deserve. So we cannot accept and be complicit in a system that values some children over others and then complain when the children that have been dismissed and devalued then act out in desperation and despair. So we have an opportunity, Chicago. We have a moment, as our panelists have said, we have an opportunity to hold accountable those who have been in positions of power and leadership and who have abused it. We have an opportunity to say, you do not get to wreak havoc and death and destruction and damage on children and communities across the nation, across the continent, across 2 continents, and then walk away unscathed. We get this opportunity to publicly denounce these bad, failed policies and decisions, and we can hold the parties responsible for them. We can say, no, your history shows that you are not worthy to serve the children of our city or of any city. So I thank you again for all of our panelists. I thank those of you who are here, and I'm going to turn it back over to Lee and Brenna because they have some next steps for us about how we can absolutely respond in this moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Monique, for being an excellent moderator. And thank you to all of our panelists for coming here and really sharing your stories and your heartbreak. It's definitely hard for all of us as parents, as teachers, as community members to hear about what happened in your city and to know that there are still people that are going to vote for Paul Vallas. But we need to do everything we can to get votes out for Brandon Johnson. One thing I want to point out as a call to action, there's going to be a poll that's coming up shortly, a Zoom poll. If you want to receive some follow-up information from this forum, some more information about the organizations you heard from today, you can go ahead and click yes, and we will make sure to email you some information. But also, we'll have a bunch of information on our Activate Chicago Parents page. We'll make sure we could do that. But there's much bigger things at hand right now. We want to make sure that if you are in Chicago, or even if you're not in Chicago, you can still go to brandonforchicago.com. There's opportunities to volunteer, canvass, phone bank, donate. So if you don't live here, just donate so we can get a few more yard signs out there, a few more people out there knocking doors. Because the more people hear about Paul Vallas, and the more people hear about Brandon Johnson and what the good, positive things he wants to do for schools, we can get more votes out. So if you're in Chicago, early voting starts tomorrow, Monday, March 20th. So you can get out, you can make a plan to vote. So don't just say, oh, I'll get to it on the weekend or whatever. Make a plan, put it on your calendar of when you're going to go vote. As Rosemary mentioned before, one of the things we're going to be doing is Friday, March 24th at noon. A bunch of us are going to get together at City Hall and speak more about the dangers of Paul Vallas. And then we're going to march ourselves right over to the polls and cast our votes right then. So if you are fired up and you want to join us, we will be there Friday, March 24th at noon. Happy to see you there. Otherwise, make a plan, because the actual election day, the final day to cast your vote, is Tuesday, April 4th. And it just so happens to be scheduled during Chicago Public Schools spring break. So if you already had plans, or if you can't, get childcare that day, make plans to early vote, get that vote in, and tell all of your friends and family members. One of the things I have on the screen here, it's very tiny, I know, but if you go to chicagoelections.gov or just search early voting Chicago, you can find the closest place to you to go early vote. There's lots of libraries, park districts. Please take the time. We need this energy and we need to get the votes out there. So thank you so much. Lee, if you can say a final word to wrap this up, we appreciate everyone that came to join today, and absolutely thank you to all the presenters.
Yeah, I can't believe that you guys were willing to talk to me and to make this impact on this city that I love so much. And all of the kids in Chicago Public Schools are my kids, and I don't want this to happen to them. Thank you very much. This isn't goodbye forever. And I think that wraps us up. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, you can find a full recording of this on our Facebook page and just get involved in your local area. We have to protect public education. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, everyone.